I'm sure anybody who watches a lot of atheist content is at least somewhat familiar with Dr. Frank Turek. If you watch Vice Rhino, or if you watch pretty much anyone who takes Christian apologists and deconstructs them down, you probably know who Frank Turek is. He is less important to this conversation than what he represents, so I'm not going to poison the well by doing a whole dissertation on the issues I have with Frank. But I do want to go ahead and go over his tweet here, because there's a whole conversation that starts as a result of this right here. Okay? So he says, "If someone asks you, what do you think of same-sex marriage? You can go, well, it doesn't matter what I think about it. Here's what Jesus said about it. He said that marriage is between a man and a woman. So if you want to argue with that, you can argue with Jesus, not me." So, I want to go ahead and point out that, again, this is less about Frank and more about this idea, because this idea is far more pervasive than just Frank. So, let's go over the issues with this. One, marriage is a legal thing. There are legal benefits that are locked behind marriage, and regardless of your position on the efficacy of those legal benefits, the fact of the matter is that while we live in a world where those legal benefits are locked behind marriage, those legal benefits should be accessible by everyone. Otherwise, you're going to have to make some argument that lets the United States be a Christian nation and not a nation that merely has Christians in it. If you want our laws to be based on the Bible, and you want to argue for a theocracy, then that's an entirely different conversation. But currently we are not a theocracy, and currently our marriage laws are built in such a way that it only recently started including homosexuals in their ranks of people who could benefit legally from what you got. If I can give you an example of one of the ways in which homosexual people had to deal with this in the past, back in the day, and I know I'm saying back in the day like this was something that happened back in my time, but no, go back 30 years, one of the ways that people would get their legal benefits of marriage, things that are important, especially when it comes to tax season, they would adopt each other. They would have to go through a different legal agency that they would be allowed to do. Think about this. Two people love each other and they're in a relationship. They're able to adopt one another to get legal benefits that would be tied to marriage, but they can't just get married when their relationship is no more or less valid than any other human being. So, again, Frank, while marriage is a legal denomination, a legal institution, fuck your God and fuck what he thinks. Okay? Secondly, and here's the more important part, not so much as it's more important for people who have these struggles, it's more important where Christianity is concerned. So, I'm not a Christian, but I'm going to go ahead and say that if you can't stand by your convictions, and you feel the need to hide behind your God to justify your bigotry, then I'm going to call you what you are. You're a coward. Frank Turek, if you ever find this video, just know my opinion of you is one of cowardice. I believe that you are a coward. Here's the reasoning for that. You are an important figure in apologetics. You have a large platform. And when it comes time to ask, will you or will you not be a bigot, your answer isn't to just be the bigot that you are. Your answer is to be a coward. Your answer is to go, well, it doesn't matter whether or not I'm a bigot. It matters whether or not God commands me to be a bigot. And since in your mind, in your epistemology, God is an all-knowing, all-powerful deity, you're hiding behind what you consider to be the most powerful bulwark and shield humanly possible. That is cowardly. That is something that only someone who is afraid to stand by their convictions and stand alone does. Because it's deflection. Instead of accepting the fact that you have a particular opinion on homosexuality, which is the case ontologically, you've instead decided that you're going to claim that this is all God's fault. No, don't blame me, blame God. No, it's not my fault, it's God's fault. No, it's this. Now, let's ignore the fact that Jesus never condemned homosexuality in the Bible. You may be able to find passages written by Paul or written in Leviticus that do so, and even then the scholarship on exactly how they go about that is not entirely agreed upon. But the fact of the matter is, even with the existence of those passages, if you're going to say, as Frank says here, here's what Jesus said about it, you may want to try to include something that Jesus said. Find me the passage where he says homosexuality is bad. And don't hide behind this notion that the Bible is a perfect book written in the inspiration of God, and as a result of its inspired nature, everything that is written in it is de facto by Jesus. Because if that's the case, then you have to accept the fact that if your daughter gets raped, you're perfectly fine to sell her out for 50 shekels of silver. Because when you accept the inerrancy of the Bible, when you accept that these things are not up for interpretation and are not up for change or debate, you also accept the reductio ad absurdum of every single thing in that book. And if you're willing to accept that, then maybe you're less of a coward than I thought. You're just a bigot. But when you hide behind that book, when you hide behind that notion of deity, that notion of perfection, that notion of a holy book that gets to tell you what to think and when to think, you've sacrificed your individuality, you've sacrificed your ability to call yourself a person with opinions, you've sacrificed everything in the name of hiding behind, essentially, your dad. I'm not one to use the Sky Daddy remark. I find it to be very insulting to people who are Christians in my audience. I don't like that kind of language, really, because Christian belief is its own thing, and people can't control their beliefs. And on top of that, not all Christians are bigots. My issue is not with Christianity. My issue is when you are a bigot who happens to be Christian, and you use your Christianity as a shield. When you use your Christianity as a bulwark, so that I can no longer have this conversation with you. Now you've told me to go speak to the manager, essentially. I need to go talk to God now, but funnily enough, conveniently enough, I can't do that. And neither can you. So we're left not having this conversation, and now nothing can change your mind. Nothing can change you from a position that is hurting individuals around you. We are necessarily stuck in conversational limbo. Because the person whose opinion that matters here, according to you, can never be present to the conversation. The conversation is necessarily between me and you, and it necessarily involves me, you, and the people who your opinion oppresses. But they don't get a say in this conversation, and I don't get a say in it, and you don't get a say in it. You get to scapegoat your God. Now, I want to ask you another question, if you are a Christian like Frank here, who scapegoats his deity in order to justify your bigoted opinions. How arrogant do you have to be as an individual to scapegoat someone else as your reason for having an opinion? How arrogant do you have to be? If you, as Frank Turek, or another Christian like him, tries to deflect everything to the Bible and say, no, this is what God says, therefore it's mine, what if, just imagine the hypothetical scenario where you've taken what you think God thinks out of context. And if you did, how arrogant of a person do you have to be to assume what they meant and potentially even get it wrong? you'd have to claim to know the mind of God, which is an absolutely stupendously arrogant statement to make if you in fact believe that God exists. So it's a multifaceted issue. It's an issue of hiding behind a deity like a coward instead of accepting the fact that you have an opinion that may or may not have a consequence behind it, especially to minority groups. It's also an issue of being arrogant and assuming what that deity must necessarily believe. You necessarily believe that God made someone gay and then decided to make them suffer, and then you decided that this God was all good, somehow. And of course, it is a stupendous reach of your bigotry, which is the first issue that I pointed out. It is a stupendous reach of your bigotry to try to argue that your book necessarily must have command over some minority group's life, over and above what we've argued democratically. At the end of the day, God's not beholden to this government. People are. So at the end of the day, it should be people that are beholden to this government that make the decisions about the government. Not the God who can really just screw off. Nothing he says, does, or thinks should have an effect on our government here. He literally has his own place where he can do all of that. So, again, this conversation is not just about Frank. It is about Christians like Frank. And if you are a Christian like Frank, I would ask you to please reevaluate your position if all you can do to maintain bigotry like homophobia, as demonstrated here, is hiding behind your book. Regardless, though, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, please hit subscribe, and as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here, after you've let me know your opinions in the comment section below.